They liberated Mosul. Mosul, the biggest ISIS stronghold city, and this is from Ian Bremmer. Mosul liberated. Looks liberated. That's also the headline in the New York Times. Iraqi Prime Minister arrives in Mosul to declare victory over ISIS. We won. And it's not funny, all right? It's tragic. But it's funny that people would go there to declare victory. To me, that's a victory. That's the result of Colin Powell lying in front of the UN.
My colleagues, every statement I make today is backed up by sources, solid sources. These are not assertions. What we're giving you are facts and conclusions based on solid intelligence. I cannot tell you everything that we know, but what I can share with you, when combined with what all of us have learned over the years, is deeply troubling. Ladies and gentlemen, these are not assertions. These are facts, corroborated by many sources, some of them sources of the intelligence services of other countries. Indeed, the facts and Iraq's behavior show that Saddam Hussein and his regime are concealing their efforts to produce more weapons of mass destruction. We have first-hand descriptions of biological weapons factories on wheels and on rails. There can be no doubt that Saddam Hussein has biological weapons and the capability to rapidly produce more, many more. What makes this picture significant is that we have a human source who has corroborated that movement of chemical weapons occurred at this site at that time. Our conservative estimate is that Iraq today has a stockpile of between 100 and 500 tons of chemical weapons agent. These are not assertions. What we're giving you are facts and conclusions based on solid intelligence. We also have sources who tell us that since the 1980s, Saddam's regime has been experimenting on human beings to perfect its biological or chemical weapons. A source said that 1,600 death row prisoners were transferred in 1995 to a special unit for such experiments. Saddam Hussein already possesses 2 out of the 3 key components needed to build a nuclear bomb. He has a cadre of nuclear scientists with the expertise, and he has a bomb design. What I want you to know today is that Iraq has programs that are intended to produce ballistic missiles that fly over 1,000 kilometers. Terrorism has been a tool used by Saddam for decades. Saddam was a supporter of terrorism long before these terrorist networks had a name. And this support continues. The nexus of poisons and terror is new. The nexus of Iraq and terror is old. The combination is lethal. With this track record, Iraqi denials of supporting terrorism take their place alongside the other Iraqi denials of weapons of mass destruction. It is all a web of lies. Clearly, Saddam Hussein and his regime will stop at nothing until something stops him.
As we discovered later, that a lot of the sourcing that had been attested to by the intelligence community was wrong. Imagine how I felt the day that they finally came in and said to me, well, you know, we don't have 4 independent sources for that biological warfare van. It's one guy, and he's loopy, and he's in a German jail, and we've never talked to him. Hello?
My colleagues, every statement I make today is backed up by sources, solid sources. These are not assertions. What we're giving you are facts and conclusions based on solid intelligence.
We invaded a country that was very fragilely held together by a strongman dictator. And when he did our bidding, he was our friend, and we sold him chemical weapons to use against the Kurds. We did that. And when he wasn't useful to us, we put an embargo on medicine and killed, some people said, 500,000 kids. And we invaded his country. Millions of people displaced. Hundreds of thousands of people killed. They're still being killed every day because of what we did. This is still going on. That was 2003. We invaded Iraq. It is still going on, 2017. This is 2017. This is because of that. And here's what the New York Times says about it. The victory marked the formal end of a bloody campaign that lasted nearly 9 months. 9 months that they've been doing this. So just bombing the shit out of that city. Left much of Iraq's second largest city in ruins. The 9-month assault on Mosul kills thousands of people and displaced nearly 1 million more. So that's still because of us. So the millions of people. Imagine if you had to leave your house right now because someone was going to drop a bomb in your neighborhood. That's what we did. Imagine if you had to leave. Where would you go? How would you find food? Where would you work? How would you get your kids medicine? How would you go? That's what we did. And we did it for oil. Fossil fuels. We did it for money. Mosul was the largest city in either Iraq or Syria that was held by the Islamic State, and its loss signifies the waning territorial claims of a terrorist group that, listen to how the New York Times describes this, had its beginnings in the aftermath of the American invasion of Iraq in 2003. Wow. Let's unpack that paragraph, shall we? Mosul was the largest city in either Iraq or Syria held by the Islamic State. Why? Who's the Islamic State? You mean ISIS? And why were they holding Mosul? Oh, that's right, because we came in and we overturned their country. A terrorist group that had its beginnings in the aftermath of the American... Here's how I would write that. The Islamic State, which is a military organization, started in response to the American illegal invasion of and slaughter of Iraqi citizens. That's how I would write that paragraph. That's not how New York Times wrote it at all. That after the American invasion, you mean after the illegal American invasion, after the universally considered a war crime American illegal invasion, that turned out to be false? That they could have written it that way. It's weird how the New York Times still doing the government's bidding. Still. They had its beginnings. I love that's just such a what a mealy. They had its beginnings.
That's their origin story. Yeah. That's when they decide to get together, track those early demos because of that invasion.
Yeah, they're the people who were in the Iraqi army that we overthrew. The Sunnis. Yeah, ISIL, the Sunnis, Islamic State, the Sunnis, the Sunnis who had previously controlled the goddamn country. We came in and overthrew them, and that's where we got ISIS. They didn't have their beginnings after the American invasion. America legally overthrew a government, and that's who they are. America overthrew a government in another part of the world to steal their fossil fuels. And the people left behind are those. The group is also threatened with the loss of its de facto capital, the Syrian city of Raqqa, which is encircled by Arab and Kurdish fighters supported by the United States. Well, we support them today. We might not support them tomorrow. They're doing our bidding today. We might sell somebody gas to bomb the Kurds tomorrow. Who knows? We did it before. Oh, by the way, the rebels in Raqqa, we used to train them and support them. Now I guess we're not anymore. The CIA, the United States. So the same people were fighting in Mosul, we were training, arming in Syria because we wanted to overthrow Assad. And why are we doing both things? Fossil fuel, baby. Fossil fuel. But the end of the Islamic State's hold on Mosul does not mean peace is at hand. Other cities and towns in Iraq remain under the militants' control. And so we'll be able to keep this stupid war going, probably until your kids have kids. And that's not what it says. And Iraqis expected an increase in terrorist attacks. So after this big victory, there's going to be an increase in terrorist attacks in urban centers, especially in the capital, Baghdad, as the group reverts to its insurgent roots. Insurgents. That's what they call, when you occupy someone else's country with the military, the people fighting you, they call insurgents. Isn't that funny? Not the people who, they don't call them civilians who live there. They call them insurgents. It was far more brutal than many expected, the fight over Mosul. This is all from the New York Times article. It was far more brutal than many expected, with dense house-to-house fighting and a ceaseless barrage of snipers and suicide bombers. The fight for Mosul was some of the toughest urban warfare since World War II.
I have a question. What were they expecting? It was far more brutal than many expected. Right. Hey, we're going to bomb for 9 months. That sounds brutal. It's not going to be that brutal. Just 9 months of bombing.
Just 9 months.
Won't be that brutal.
We're going to be fighting these people who we've been calling animals, the worst of the worst, some kind of crazy terror, that they don't have any respect for human life, and they control this city. But it was tougher fighting than we thought. What? What? Yeah, it was tougher. We thought they'd just leave. Iraqi officers whose lives had been defined by ceaseless war said the fighting was among the worst they had seen. So this is some brutal shit. It's still happening, and it's still happening because of the United States. The Iraqis and their international partners will now be confronted by the immense challenge of restoring essential services like electricity and repair and rebuilding destroyed hospitals, schools, homes, and bridges, which were wrecked in the ground combat or by the airstrikes, artillery fire, and HIMARS rocket attacks carried out by the American-led coalition to help Iraqi troops advance. Isn't that nice? So those HIMARS rocket attacks, the Americans would do that so that the local Iraqi troops could advance. So we're taking sides in a civil war, and so we're going to use our rockets to, destroy their town. But they call that providing, cover. Oh, my God. So here's the military victory in Mosul has come without a political agreement between Iraqi's two largest communities, the Sunnis and Shiite Arabs, whose stark sectarian divisions led to the rise of the Islamic State. That is not what led to the rise of the Islamic State. What led to the rise of the Islamic State is the United States' illegal invasion and slaughter of hundreds of thousands of Iraqis. That's what led to the rise of the Islamic State. That is what led to the rise of the Islamic State. And don't listen to the fucking New York Times. Lapdogs to power. Fired the only guy who was against the goddamn war at their paper, Chris Hedges. And here they are, 14 years later, still printing bullshit. That's what. Oh, it was the Sunni Shiite. Their stark sectarian division. Did you know that? That's what led to this. It was. It wasn't that. It wasn't us. It was these guys can't get along. All we do is overthrow their government, kill everybody, and then all of a sudden nobody can get along no more.
Well, and I like how a couple paragraphs prior, they kind of subtly hinted at, what you just said.
Yeah.
That, their beginnings happened around the same time of the 2003 invasion. Weird coincidence.
Coinky-dink.
Weird timing.
Coinky-dinky. For many members of Iraqi's minority Sunnis, the Islamic State was seen as a protector against abuses they had suffered under Iraq's Shiite-led government, especially under the former Prime Minister Nuri Kamal. So a lot of people in Mosul were friendly to ISIL, or the Islamic State. Why? Because the guy leading the country was a dick to them. Because they used to have a Sunni leader, minority leader, strong man, and then the United States illegally invades their country, overthrows their government, installs a puppet, Malachi, who's now a Shiite, who's actually more friendly to Iran, and is brutal to the Sunnis. So the Sunnis, that's what this is. This is a civil war. inside Iraq. And while the Islamic State, with its harsh rule, alienated many of the Sunni residents and it sought to represent, residents said its ideology caught on among some of the population, particularly young men. So I guess, again, if you want to know how to create a terrorist, just ask the U.S. military to show up, and we will create terrorists. By the truckload, baby. There is no use in reconstructing the city if the people of Mosul don't change, Miss Abdullah said. There are still many people who assist ISIS, and the acts of violence will never end. Yeah, again, they live there. That's where they live. That's where they live. That'd be the problem. That's the problem in Afghanistan. The Taliban lives there. That's where they live. I don't know what the...
It's almost like if you destroy everything somebody knows and holds dear, they're not going to be happy about it.
Ha! Frankly, I'm desperate over the future, he said. ISIS destroyed the people's mentality, and the wars destroyed the infrastructure, and we paid the price. There is no such thing as the phase after ISIS. ISIS is a mentality, and this mentality will not end with guns alone. That's a Mosul resident said that. Wow. So ISIS destroyed their mentality, and the United States bombs destroyed their infrastructure. And there is the fear that many Islamic State fighters who were not captured or killed had simply, get this, simply put down their guns and blended in with the civilian population to live to fight another day. If you see that movie War Machine, which I did with Brad Pitt, and it's on Netflix, it shows you, they say to Brad Pitt, who's the general, they go, I'm supposed to go into this town and I'm supposed to know who's the friendly people and who's the unfriendly people, and they all look exactly alike. I'm a Marine, I kill. That's what I'm supposed to do. That's in that movie, and it's awesome, and that's exactly what this is. So now the people just take off their uniform and they blend, they shave their beard. Well, here, do you know that most of the ISIS fighters have shaved their beards and took off their clothes and now they are free? That was a member of Mosul's local council. All they got to do is change their jacket, shave off their beard. They're regular Iraqis, baby. They live there. So here's my last thing from that article. This is from Brigadier General Andrew A. Croft, a senior Air Force officer with the American-led task force that is fighting the Islamic State. You know, the enemy they created. He says Mosul and Raqqa is not the end of it by any stretch of the imagination. So that's right. So just like George Orwell said, this is endless war for endless peace. Why the fuck are we still in Iraq? We're still there. We are still there in Iraq fighting our asses off. And this general says that this is taking over the second largest city in Iraq and winning and freeing the people there, liberating the city of Mosul from the Islamic State. That is not by any stretch of the imagination. That is not the end of our fighting over there by any stretch of the imagination. So even if you stretch it this much, that's too much.
And it's a good thing, too, because I don't think we'll ever gain retribution for the events of September the 11th, 2001.
How can we? We'll never get our full bloodlust off of that, right?
No.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like endless war seems appropriate.
I think so. We've had endless war since 9/11. Endless war. It ain't stopping. The New York Times still are fucking mealy-mouthing you what's going on over there. They still won't even tell you that what we did. This is all because of us, baby. This isn't because of the Islamic State. There was no Islamic State till we fucking did this. And we're still doing it. We are still doing it. You want to see what we're still doing in Iraq? Look, we're winning. Look, we're winning.
That's a truly horrifying photograph. I can't imagine an American city looking like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, imagine if that's Chicago or Atlanta or New York City. Imagine if that's New York City. Imagine if that's Los Angeles. Imagine if that's San Francisco. We won. And that's because another country invaded us and ruined our second biggest fucking city. Imagine how wouldn't you be a terrorist? What they wouldn't call you'd be a freedom fighter. I'm sure the ISIS people call themselves freedom fighters. That's because of their mainstream news lies to you still, won't tell you the truth, is a lapdog to power. That's what this is, and they're still doing it. Nowhere in this article does it mention that, oh yeah, by the way, this was all because of what we did illegally. And by the way, no one went to jail for that. So when another country does something, we better hold them accountable. We better start a war because Russia hacked the fucking DNC's emails. We better start a war over that. But nobody even goes. We never even had a fucking hearing about the Iraq war. Do you know that? They never even went like, hey, let's see who we should hold accountable for this big fuck up. Never. Nothing. Hey, maybe we should impeach the president for lying us. And Nancy Pelosi says impeachment's off the table. They impeached the Democrat over a fucking blowjob. There you go. Isn't that, look, it's. So there you go. It's liberated.